What's your earliest memory of the game?
Backyard, just playing. My mom had a home daycare, so we would just play soccer, all sports at that point. I think it got real once you kind of got into like the playgrounds of elementary school, right? Where you're playing and you're out and you're competitive. You have the co-ed, it's boys and girls doing it at that level, right? I felt like, it's funny when you ask that, I felt like the girls kind of dominated us when we were in elementary school. They're just a little bit,
I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
like we had girls on our team all the way up through middle school that were athletic, more mature than us. And then, kind of when you get into that middle school where now you're bringing a bunch of kids together from the different elementary schools, I think that's kind of where it got real, where you're kind of like, oh, I know I'm somewhat good, right? Because you're in an elementary setting, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty good, I'm athletic. But then when you got into middle school and you brought 4 other elementary schools together and you started to compete, you're like, yeah, I got this, So those days, I can still remember even where we played at the elementary school, in the back area, no grass, really. Like you're just like kind of out there playing. So I would say that's probably my first and foremost of like a memory that I always bring. So, because club soccer this is what you're getting, this is what you're paying for, regardless if you can make.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So now this is a structure where it's like we have this structure, but there's also some add-ons that for those, let's just say we get 70 kids in the high school age group, maybe 25 of them want the extra 4th training session with a different college coach. Now they're exposed to those 10 college coaches. They're opting into it and paying for it. But the rest of the family's like, I don't need it. I'm okay with this. And there's no harm in it. And I think when you give kids and families, I don't want to say a say, but almost kind of like, hey, we hear you. We understand what you're saying. It happens with my Westtown kids. I mean, the parents are like, I'm paying astronomical amount of money to play club soccer, to train on a quarter of a field and to go to some showcases and to play league games, but there's no other structure, right? At the end of the day, Andrew, that's what everyone does. And so if you kind of set a structure that's not overwhelming, or families know they're not going to be traveling every single weekend, and you don't have to do it overnight, I think families financially will be like, okay, I can get behind this, right? If you get the right trainers, right? Like at the end of the day, it still comes down to, do you have the right trainers that are still going to drive these kids to be better than they were, or to push themselves to the max?
That's a conversation I've had a lot with parents too, of like the aspect of the coach, and like there's definitely an element to different clubs have a culture.
Yep.
There's a different culture, if you want to call it, like a certain atmosphere or vibe of things. And sometimes it depends on the zone that you're in, because then you have different zone directors. Sometimes it depends on, the director of coaching who's been there. Then yes, the clubs do have these like set standard associations with a certain league or a certain level of play. And so they kind of identify themselves in a like certain status and level of quality generally, right? And there's some nuances to that, but generally you kind of have that idea. But I have this conversation a lot with parents where like, yes, you might be looking for this. It's always like there's a grass is greener type of view, of course. But I always say like, it's so hard, because at the end of the day, like you're saying, the specific coach of that team is, I think, usually the biggest indicator of like satisfaction and enjoying the game. And then obviously improvement and learning. And then after that, it's like the makeup of the kids on that team.
Yeah, my niece just changed clubs. She went to a GA club, and it's the same thing I said to my brother. The name of that club brings you to the tournaments. Your coach gives you the experience, and that's what it is. So if you don't like the coach, I don't care what club you're going to, you're not going to have the experience, even if it's a big brand, right? If it's a big time brand, that's why kids leave clubs, right? It's not because of the club itself. It's because the coach did not provide, son or daughter, an experience that was satisfying. Now, it's not always the coach, right? We know that. But at the end of the day, the club brand brings you certain thing, notoriety. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the experience that a son or daughter are having, right, is what that coach is, bringing, and the experiences that they have. And
yeah. And is there a way for, like, if I know as a parent, I know something about that club, or I've heard things, how can I do my research and my homework to know more about that coach, about that specific team, what the options might be? It's a conversation I have a lot with people, but I'm curious, thoughts right.
I think the world is so small now in youth soccer with social media. You're going to know somebody on that team, like might knew 3 other players because it was in their town and they played for that coach, at that point, right? So they're going to know somebody at that point through the competition of high school, through the competition of, other friendships, other sports, things like that. So coaches get reputations, right? I think that that's something that it's pretty evident, right? When you see people gravitating towards coaches or like, hey, that person did a really good job, and things like that. But most of the time you're going to know, right? You're going to know that experience. Or it's kind of a lot of families, to be honest, Andrew, are just like, I just need the brand. I just need the club brand to get my son or daughter recruited. And we'll just get through it with the coach. It might not be the best, but that club brand, when I go to an event, is going to bring 200 colleges over the course of my 3 games. And that is what my son and daughter needs, right? So some people will sacrifice the other most important part, which is probably the coach experience, to get the brand of the club. And then you have others that I think, to an extent, they will use the brand of the club. And then once they are committed, you'll be like, oh, I don't want that anymore. Because I'm committed, I used that club to help my son or daughter get committed. And now I want my son and daughter in their last maybe year and a half to get the experience from a coach that is going to provide that for them. So it's very interesting. I think at a younger age, people use the brand more than anything. You're not necessarily looking at the coach and what that experience is going to look like. And then I think as you move along, the brand itself potentially is not as important, but the experience that you're having and the development it becomes more important, is what I've seen.
And I mean, you've operated at youth level, like now you're taking this new role, director of coaching at Lower Merion Soccer Club outside of Philadelphia. Been director of soccer operations and head coach at the Westtown School, which is like extremely high level academic prep boarding school, right, in the Philadelphia area. Coach at the university level too, across various divisions. So like you've seen kind of all the different faces of, let's say from 21, 22 years down in the US, right? So what do you think it is about like the college, the university soccer experience that like is so beneficial and has so much value?
Yeah, I think life skills. I think being a part of a team, right? I always say that to everybody. I think and to me, Andrew, it doesn't even have to be with a university or college at that next level, right? It could be a club opportunity, right? And I think you're seeing more and more kids kind of gravitate towards that club experience, right? Like not sacrificing the academics of what they're looking for just to go to college and play collegiately, I think is starting to showcase itself. I think NCAA rules are starting to showcase themselves where kids are seeing club soccer is an avenue in college. And I think when you look at it that way, the experience, then, why do kids not want to play in college, right? It has to be something through the youth level, or they're saying, hey, I'm not dropping my standards academically for what I want at the next level collegiately. I've sacrificed enough through club that it's like, I just don't want to keep sacrificing myself. So, but to the college side of things, I do think it's an experience that I coached at it for 14 years. I miss it all the time, right? The competitiveness, the camaraderie, the competition, right? All those things that go along with, being part of a team. And really at the end of the day, why Westtown was so attractive to me is I can recruit kids. I can make it feel like a college experience for those kids at a high school level. Now obviously it's not going to be as cutthroat, right? It's not going to be, hey, we got to do this, this, and this. You're kind of more developing them so that when they get to that next level, they're prepared, right? And that's kind of been my message to all the kids I coach at Westtown is I'm doing this now so that when you step on campus for your first preseason, you are prepared. If you're not prepared, that's now on me and not you. So
Yeah.
And it'd be the same in the club experience, right? Like when we're preparing you and we're coaching you, it could be from U8 to U9 to U10, all the way through. I think the development and the structure and the communication through the youth and then kind of getting themselves into college is the same exact thing. And I think college is such an attraction, such an appeal for domestic kids and international kids, because I think internationally, they see there's an opportunity to play professionally here, right? When you look at a lot of kids that come internationally, where do they normally start? They start at, mostly Division I, Division II, NAI, JUCO, but then they kind of try to work their way up, right? They try to work their way, if they're NAI, JUCO, to a Division II, to Division I. And they see that there's opportunities professionally, right? I don't know if every domestic kid views it that way. I think domestic kids view it as, I want this experience. Maybe it helped me get into a university or college, and I want to maintain that competitiveness, within that next 4 years of my life, 5 years of my life at this point. But that's really where I think the preparation of club, and why I'm excited about kind of where the direction we can go to at Lower Merion is, yeah, we might not send kids everywhere, right? We might only go to school, send kids 2 hours around here, right? And that's okay. But as long as they're prepared, if they want to play, we have to be that club that's like, yes, we are going to prepare you to play at college if that's what you want, right? And I think just trying to continue, Andrew, to educate families in so many different ways, right? I've been in club, in college, work for a company that help people navigate the college recruiting process. And, I think there's just so many people that are just pressured, to be honest, or kind of, hey, this is kind of what you do. You go to college and you play a college sport if you did it right through high school. And I think, helping them recognize and to be honest, just being truthful with them. I think it's the one thing that a lot of people at the end of the day, Andrew, respect about is like, I'm just honest. I'm just going to be honest with where your son or daughter are going to go. I will help you as much as I possibly can. I will answer all the questions that you have. And if I don't have that answer, I'll ask somebody in the college game about that answer, right? And so I think that's why college soccer is appealing, is there's just so many different now avenues you can go to, transfer, things like that. Maybe you're not at your dream school right away, but you can get to it, by playing yourself into it. So there's just so many opportunities, so many things.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned like of having to prepare players, prepare families. Let's say I'm somebody who is feeling kind of overwhelmed with the information or kind of the lack of information I might have. Where do you start with educating the families of like, hey, just so they can get their bearings and get a sense of what are the important questions, what are the important things to consider going forward to like selecting a university and for their child being part of that recruiting journey?
Yeah, I think for me, and if you ask any of my kids at West Down, they get frustrated because they'll tell me a list of schools, and the first question I was like, "Tell me why you like all these schools, right? Tell me your interest. Take sport out of it." I know that sounds cliche because everyone says, "Clicks, you break your leg. What happened?" I get all that. I ask questions that become most important because at the end of the day, soccer is only about 10 to 20% of your experience, right? The rest of the time is the community. The rest of the time is the academics, the social, things like that. So I think just really starting to ask the right questions at a younger age is important, Andrew. I think every family is going to be different. I think if you're financially capable, I think getting onto college campuses, it doesn't necessarily have to be schools that you like, but seeing kind of that demographic of a city school, a suburban school, a rural school, things like that is important, right? I think it doesn't have to be necessarily the school you end up, but kind of what that setting looks like. I always encourage everyone I work with, 9th and 10th grade, you should just be stopping and visiting as many colleges as you possibly can, right? I think you should just be getting onto campuses, seeing what they're like, because then it kind of helps you set a trend of, okay, this is what I like. And I'm going through that right now with a senior. Listen, he wants to be in and around a city at West Down. Like, I get it. He wants a little bit bigger than West Down, and he wants to be in and around a city. Okay, well, that limits a ton of schools, right, that he could end up going to. So, we had to educate him. I had to educate him on, hey, listen, this is going to limit your options. But if that is truly what you're sticking to, perfect. So at least I now know the other 10 schools that we can look at, right? Where I think what ends up happening with a lot of families, Andrew, is they start getting emails. College coaches send stuff about camps, which rightfully so. I did it all the time as a college coach. And now people are starting to be like, okay, this school's interested in me. This school's interested in me. This school's interested in me. I'm getting this. I'm getting that. And now they don't know, right? Because a lot of people enter at the end, they don't even know the rules, like the communication process, things like that. So I think just educating like, hey, till June 15th, these are all just going to be sending camp emails because they can't communicate with you unless they communicate through a club coach to have you call them, things like that. So, I think just asking the right questions. I think a lot of people, Andrew, if you're going to say they always want bigger than what they came from as well when it comes to school. But what does big look like? Right? Like, that's why I always say to my West Town kids, okay, you want bigger than West Town. I get it. But what's big? Like, do you want a Penn State? Okay. If you want a Penn State, why do you want a Penn State? Okay. Do you want it for football? Do you want it for the experience of sports, the experience of, social, Greek life? Do you want an experience of this? Because if you're telling me you want big, my brother went to Penn State and he hung out with the same 20 kids for 4 years.
Yeah, same. For all the kids that I went to high school with who went to Penn State, they were the same.
So like, what is that experience of big look like? Like, if you tell me you want football, wrestling, basketball, and you want that, okay, that's different than we can provide that even at a school that has 8,000 kids, right? Like a Villanova or, a school like a Georgetown, so there's experiences like that. So, I think just asking the right questions and diving into it, more with those families and then the communication side of it with them and kind of what that looks like, from that end of things. But I always say get on campuses first. That's always first and foremost. It doesn't have to be the schools that you're interested in, but like, hey, if you're going to a showcase somewhere, just go see some campuses, right? Because you're going to get a sense of like, oh, I kind of like this. I don't like that. I think letting people also know that every journey is your own. I think that's the one thing that I think, Andrew, the difference of when you and I grew up was we didn't have social media. So there's always a way for a player now to compare themselves to somebody else.
100%. Yeah.
And that comparison hurt the journey of that kid sometimes. And it's more parent driven. I would say, hey, a lot of times it's the parent of like, my son or daughter is better than that girl. And why is she going to that school? And my daughter is going to this school, or son's going to this school. And it's also the same thing of educating them on that process of, hey, that coach likes this type of player. You're not that type of player. So in reality, you're not even a good fit for them. Even though that's a great school, a high program, they look for this, right? And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand is they don't understand what coaches are looking for. Every coach has a different coaching style, right? Some coaches like, I want small technical players. Some coaches might like, I like big and athletic. So like educating families as much as you can about those types of things is so important because they just get caught up in the emotions of it, right? College recruiting is emotional for families. I get it, right? They're doing all this stuff to play on these high big time club teams, and they're seeing all these kids commit, and their son or daughter's not yet, and they emotionally
they don't understand the nuance, right? On the athletic side too, like you're saying, of what coaches are looking for, but then even like the academic as well. And I think it's great advice you give to like just go see campuses, go to camps, like just to get exposure, because then you have a bigger sample size of figuring out, okay, you might be.
So keep your mind on them, Andrew. It's their journey, right? It's their journey. It will end, if you stay with it, you will end up playing college soccer right? And I think just continue educating families like that. And I'd say, Andrew, just end with this, is like, a lot of kids don't know what they want out of their experience of playing college soccer. When you ask them, they're like, well, I want to play at the highest level I can. Are you going to sit for 2 years? They have a junior, they have a sophomore center back. This is just all league. Are you willing to sit? Goalies, are you willing to sit? Or do you want to go to another school? Maybe it's not as high of a level in their minds, but you can be a 4-year starter, right? Do you want to win all the time? Some of the higher level programs don't win as much as a lower level, Division 2 or 3, whatever, but even within Division 1s, right? Like, what are you looking for out of your college experience? You've just competed for how many years at a high level, won a lot of games, and you want to play at the highest level and take the first offer, but maybe that program never competes for a league championship or competes for a national championship. So I think you asking them the right questions is so important. Just, they don't even have to give replies. It's just more you're ingraining ideas, thoughts into their brain to see. And you'll see at the end of the day, a lot of them will be like, oh no, I want to play. Okay, well, they just told you they have a junior center back. That means you're sitting probably for 2 years unless something happens. Are you okay with that? Are you not okay with that? And some families are okay with that. Like, some people are like, I'm good with that, and I think also educating them what success looks like in college, right? When I was at Division 1s, if you played for 2 years, you were pretty good. The exceptional, probably higher end scholarship kids played more early. But for those kids that are like, maybe they're academic kids or whatever, and they're coming in and they're not high aid, and you play for 2 years, that's amazing. You know what I mean? That's an amazing career. So it's like, what do you want your career to look like is kind of questions that I think people leave out because, listen, clubs have brands that protect, right? And they want to have their brand and they want to send kids to the highest level. And I totally get that. But I think, at Westtown, it's the questions I ask my kids all the time most of the time families will reel it back when you tell them the truth and you actually take time to say, hey, listen, I'm here for the best interest of you and your daughter or son. And once they hear that and they get comfortable with you, most of the time you can end up reeling them back in to be like, okay, this is reality. Are you okay with this reality? And if you are, fine, this process is going to be easy.
Yeah. And as we're talking about these different levels at the collegiate level, right? And the different divisions and all of those kind of differences as far as like playing quality, or it brings me to another thing I wanted to chat about, which is the Best of Cup that you're a director of and you guys have been running these past couple of years. It's a really cool, like novel idea. Again, kind of, if we want to call it old school, like more what we were accustomed to like back in the day where, okay, you're taking different clubs and teams, even teams within clubs, we're playing all these different leagues, MLS Next and ECNL, ECRO, and all the different ones that are out there, and kind of throwing them all together for these showcase events. So it's a pretty cool, we talk about those levels and brand and where does like reality touch with those things. It seems like that's really what you guys are able to offer in terms of the competition and then obviously the exposure for these teams as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the event started, 2 years ago, and there was a concept that kind of we took over that was awesome. They did, kind of very similar, but kind of on a smaller scale. And yeah, I mean, Best of Cup, I mean, it says what it is, who's best, right? Like, let's match teams up from different leagues, right? Different levels. And, I think there's a lot of learning that club teams can do through the Best of, right? I think if you're wearing a certain badge and someone feels slated that you're wearing that badge and they're not, they're going to come out and compete, right? And I think for me and the company I work for, just creating high level competition against, really at the end of the day, the worst thing that's happened in youth soccer is everything's just league driven now. So you don't really play some of the other clubs to really match yourself to see where you're at, to see where you are. You're basically playing 80 to 90% of the games against your league, right? And teams within that league going to their showcases, ECNL, MLS, GA, things like that. So, the concept of what we wanted is just matching different leagues up, creating competitive environments, and then getting what at the end of the day is the next most important thing, which is college coaches to come and participate and recognize the importance of it. So, we've been able to achieve it on the boys side for 2 years. We've averaged anywhere between 175 and 200 colleges. I think the other thing that's nice, Andrew, is that it's in the Philadelphia area, so right now, even though it's in January, 6 hours in each direction, you can hit so many different markets, so many different universities and colleges. And that's what they want to see. That was the one thing that college coaches always say to me is like, I don't ever see these teams play each other anymore. They don't play each other anymore. For example, a Pipeline does not play a Sporting AC, a Penn Fusion doesn't play a Real Jersey, right? Because, they might scrimmage each other, but you're not seeing it in a competitive environment within a showcase in front of college coaches because they're just in two separate leagues at this point. So, it's bringing that together, but then also bringing so-called lower brands or lower leagues into it, where now they're competing against this level and doing well. Or, hey, a reality check. Or, hey, this is where we are and we got to build ourselves through. But it's been successful. We just hosted the women's one last weekend. It was awesome. It was, and like I said, I don't know as much about the women's side yet. But with where we were for year one to kind of where we could go for year two, I think it's gonna, really explode. And I think each gender wants different things in events and different parts of this. But, the number one thing that every club and everybody wants is they want competitive games against teams they normally play. And they want college coaches to show up on the sidelines. And we've kind of been able to provide that,
huge, yeah,
in a large scale. Right. And I think the other thing that I would say that I guess makes me proud of kind of what we started is that everything that we said, high level competition, great matchups, competitive clubs and college coaches is what we've done, and I think, for so many showcases nowadays, it's 6 different locations, you're having to travel, you're having to do this. And the thing that we get from college coaches is like, it's all right here. We don't have to really move that much. It's here. We see the level. We see teams play each other. Like this past weekend, a couple coaches came in because they wanted to see some GA teams versus ECNL. They wanted to see a group from Canada play against ECNL because they don't get that environment all the time for them. So, it just provides that opportunity for college coaches to see teams compete against each other that normally they don't see, at the end of the day. And like you said, old school kind of mentality of like, hey, let's put all leagues together and here it is. And the nice thing is that you can mix and match, right? Like you always want to keep the competitiveness, right? Like no matter what, that's the most important race. But like weaving the leagues together, is important at that point.
And I think it's interesting too. Like obviously, I think from the fan angle, even the players, like if you're somebody who's at a league that's looked down upon by the team you're about to play, like you're going to bring out your A game, right? But I think for me, when I think about for the college coach's perspective, everybody's trying to find that like hidden gem or that kid that's not getting looks or has been undervalued. And like we talked about, there's a lot that goes into these leagues that is brand related, right? And cost related as well. And so it's not necessarily like, okay, maybe for 80% of that league, that is the level of player, but then there's 20% that's getting that's not getting looked at or shouldn't be at that level, right? Or vice versa, whether they're too good or they're not strong enough. And so I think the interesting thing is when you guys bring those different groups together, it allows those coaches to see kids who are, okay, maybe this level that's considered third or fourth tier actually compete against what is a higher level and see like, do those kids have what it takes? Because just everybody's looking for that, that edge. Everybody's trying to find the player who, and making sure that whoever they're watching, if they're always going to MLS Next or they're always going to ECNL or whatever it might be, that like, okay, it gives them some context now of like what actually that level is, so that when they look at applying that to their university level,
and then listen,
they'll have assured that.
I'll bring it back to Lower Merion. We are pigeonholed in an area where MLS and ECNL and GA are taken. I don't know if we'll ever be able to get into any of those leagues, but I think we're going to be able to produce some good players, right? There's other USYS teams that are just culturally in an area where they never get a league, right? Like we talked with this one group, Lake Grove Newfields, out in the farthest east in Long Island, and they've been blocked of MLS and ECNL. Like they have really good teams. They go to USYS national finals. They win that. Like this is the perfect event for them because they don't get this opportunity nearly as much because they're just not in the league. But then the reverse side of it, and I was talking to an MLS Next coach, and it was awesome to hear this because I didn't even think about it like this because I wasn't coaching club. I'm not coaching club at the time. He's like, this is a great learning event for our kids because most MLS Next kids look down on every other club, every other league. And he goes, we come here and we lose, we tie, and they don't understand that when another league badge is coming to play you, they're going to bring their best. So he's like, Shane, I'm able to help translate that more, not particularly to the club, but now when you go to college and you're the big dog and you win the conference the year before, everybody's targeting you for the next year.
100%.
So if you look down upon the eighth place team that maybe won 0 games, the next year they're targeting you because they know right then now we can, if we beat them, we beat the best team in the league at that point, right? And it was the same thing when I was at Haverford, right? Like we had a great run, 5 finals in 7 years, 3 conference championships, Elite 8. But I know there was games that our guys weren't ready for based off of the looking at records, social media,
exactly, standings, yeah,
and so you're trying to. He's like, this event is great because it's a lesson I can teach these kids that are now moving off to college the next year, that anybody can beat anybody. It doesn't matter what badge brand you're wearing. Anybody can beat anybody a lot of times in youth soccer. And then he related it to college. And I like, it just like opened my eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. Right. Like I never thought about it the way he looked at it and viewed it as club. And then the way that he translated to college and saying, hey, listen, like this is where it would be. So he's like, this event's great because I can translate so many different ways of how this can look when you're going into college.
Yeah, and it's coming back. You said it towards the beginning of like the value of even just playing in college, right? We can even say it at these youth levels, like how that translates to the life aspect and the life skills. It's like doesn't matter how talented you are, like stuff's going to happen in life that sucks, right? Certain things are going to happen that's going to be adversity for you. It's just like our ego gets into this like invulnerability of like, oh, it should be like this. And then reality happens. And I think the more that we have to, it's so frustrating. And especially for kids, it can be such a challenging time to like come to grips with that. But reality doesn't care about like your perception of where you think you are in terms of your ability and what things should happen. Like it is what it is. So I like that aspect of it. I like how you guys are bucking some of these like trends and these little bubbles that we can sometimes get into and really having everybody go against each other. So
yeah, and listen, I respect everybody else for what they're doing. I understand the showcase side of it. Like I coach college. I loved recruiting. Like that was one of my passions. But like to see this many talented teams in one setting in a small environment just goes a long way.
cool. So we're gonna get to some of our segments here, right? I'm excited to get your answers for. I can get to know you a little bit more here. So first one, so we've got our 5-a-side segment. So you got to pick your all-time 5-a-side team, but you've got to put yourself somewhere in there. So it's you and 4 legends, buddies, whoever you want. Like you're taking on the world. What 4 players are you picking alongside you?
Cantona, Eto, Zidane, and Yaya Toure. Done.
Wow. Okay.
Myself.
All right. What's your lineup? Where are you playing?
On the middle of the park. Come on. In the middle of the park. No. I'm probably on the bench with those guys, but they're all kind of, center mid-ish, tight, kind of the lead.
So you're just going to be like, yeah, versatile. So you guys are kind of going to have this like, the formation's not as important. Everybody's going to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at that, they were also kind of all leaders within their groups that, they all played obviously at the highest level, but they were kind of all the leaders of their groups, all adding something. I mean, obviously Zidane's running the World Cup, right? Like what he did there, is memorable, right? And then Cantona, kids won't even remember him, but he was just, he was the first guy, right, that I watched with Man U, and you just knew him and Giggsy and, those guys. But, he was the guy, not that I resembled my game after, but was like, he's an SOB, like you're just like, don't mess with my teammates. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take everything to get it done. Eto, I mean, who doesn't love that guy? I mean, the guy was just incredible.
That's a great shout, man, because he's not like your first. Most people are saying like they're Maradonas and Messi's and all that, but like his years were like Ronaldinho and stuff playing at Barca and some of those seasons he had.
And he kind of got hidden, you know what I mean? He kind of got like hidden behind some of the other players during his era. But then Yaya, I mean, the stuff he did at his size and just kind of what he was able to do, he was just so fun. Like, and listen, I don't watch every soccer game. I don't, but like when he was on, it was kind of like, he always just had moments that you're like, geez Louise, how did he just do that? Right. And all these other guys do. But for those were the guys that I kind of, Eto was kind of during the era where I was working at Angelo's Soccer Corner. So there's like games on in his jersey and the World Cup. And he's kind of the guy, coming out of Africa at that point. And then, the Zidane World Cup run was just, it is what it is. He was the best player in the world at that point. So, and Eto was also that guy that was kind of the first, and I'm sure I'm missing guys that kind of was the first, like, gave back to his community, right? And they kind of started to showcase that a little bit, during that time. And, now you have everybody, right? And it's incredible. Him and Mikel, right, were kind of the first two I always think of. And Drogba, right? You put Drogba into that mix as well. But they were just always played entertaining soccer, right? It wasn't always disciplined, but it was always entertaining. And it was kind of, fun to watch.
Yeah. And genius and magic. Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. Cool. Well, Shane, we appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. It's really cool that you're operating in these like different areas of the game and have such experience, but also perspective on those to bring together, which I think is so valuable. This is how we like to finish every episode here. So I'm excited for your answer. If you could finish the sentence, because football.
It's life, right? It's life. I think because football, it's life. I think so many lessons through this sport. It's kind of crazy. Like there's just so many lessons that you can learn, and you hit on it a little bit ago, and I didn't hit on it as much as I can, but the lessons are all in the field, but how they carry through life. And I just think, coaching college and seeing all the guys now getting married and how many of the guys are going to those weddings and how many of those guys are staying connected. Like, it's just life. It's just friendships, life, lessons, good and bad, right? It's not always going to be great, but I just think,
painful. Yeah.
because football is life, right? There's just so many things you can fall back on. I mean, half of what I do now came from an experience through sport, right? Football.
Yeah.
I played soccer, I played basketball, I played baseball. It came through some type of experience through winning and being highly, highly successful to failing, right? And losing the game and missing a PK, that did all that. So, all those lessons. And that's why I think sport is life to me. Like, I just think in general is just life. You learn so many lessons, but then you also gain so many friendships. Like college soccer brought me so many friendships, Andrew. Like, that's why I love Best of Cup. I mean, the competition trait, but just to get back with college friends that I don't see anymore because I don't coach college is like the best, right? And so, when you say because football, I just think it's life. I just think there's so many things that you can walk away with in this journey, and everything I relate back to is now like a memory, right? Oh, this happened, so I can speak upon that
moment.
And it can relate to so many things in sport or out of sport, right? Like when I worked with WAGs, it was like even through business, sales, things like that, I had to take stuff that I learned in sport and move it over to that side. And then, you take what you learned in business and move it over to sport and philosophy and coaching and things like that. So I just think, because football, I think it's life. You can put lessons behind it. I just think it's life.
Awesome, man. Yeah, agreed. And Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso would agree too. I don't know if he's watching. That's his tagline. So, awesome, man. Well, Shane, thank you so much. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? We'll put the info in the description.
Yeah, I mean, I just think via my Instagram or LinkedIn. Really, LinkedIn is kind of where I roll, especially on the business side of things. So, Instagram's fine, but like LinkedIn is where I try to connect with everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, so everybody make sure you check that out in the description. We'll link the LinkedIn and the gram for Shane. But thanks so much, everybody, for watching, for listening. It was awesome, man. We appreciate you so much for being on and for everybody for watching and giving us your time.
No worries. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool. All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.